there are quite a lot of challenges which one faces when they're starting up. And one needs to realize that only, a founder himself or herself is never going to be sufficient to run a business successfully. It is never about an individual or two co-founders. It is always about the team as a whole.
Hey everyone, this is Shruti. Welcome to my podcast, I'm Just Curious, where I talk of all things I'm curious about, with the people I'm curious about, and how they turn their passion into their profession. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to someone who's the founder of the first and one of the largest co-working spaces in Ahmedabad. He did finance from US, from Drexel University's Labao School of Business, and from there went on to Singapore to work in a real estate e-commerce based firm, Fly Spaces. And I'm very happy to talk about all things startups with my guest, Yash Shah. How are you today?
Hi Shruti, thank you for having me over here.
Thank you for coming.
I am doing very well. I think it's the festive season around, travel's opened up.
Yes.
Don't think can be better than this. So
yes, that's what most people are looking forward to.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
including me.
Including me, yes, definitely. So let's start from the beginning. As I said in my introduction that you, first of all, I did not mention that you were doing CA, but you quit that and then decided to go to US. So talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I think it was brought to me by my father ever since I was in the 8th grade.
Okay.
He was a chartered accountant by profession, and he always thought that doing CA would open a vision altogether and be very helpful to me. As I grew older, I realized that I think profession or just being a professional wasn't the thing which was for me. I thought that I always wanted to have something of my own, always wanted to run a business rather than being or doing a professional job or having a job in general. And I think because of that, I think I did not want to pursue accounting or chartered accountancy as a life goal in general. I
Right.
thought that it was extremely important for my growth, but not as a career altogether. And hence I decided that, I do not want to diverge from the path as well, because I was always very good at numbers. So I thought that instead of looking at accounting, which is looking at the books
For someone else.
for someone else or other of the previous year, I'll focus on finance,
Right.
which is going to be predicting the future or looking forward to the books for the future, and doing something which will help me as an individual to forecast what the further life looks like.
Right.
And that's why I decided to pursue finance over chartered accounting. And always, as I said, never ever wanted to be a professional or never ever wanted to have a job. And I think that spoke to me, and that's what I carried forward as well.
Your dad did not hold that against you that, why
I
do you
think
want to
he is still holding it
Was that a
against
fight?
me till today morning.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think that he'll ever be happy to not see me as a CA. But well, I think he's made his peace with the fact that I've done what I wanted to, and he's happy about that. So I think that weighs down.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'll keep it that way.
That's great. So you decided to go to the US and study finance there.
Correct.
And you also made it to the Dean's Student of the Year list.
Sure.
And you finished a 4-year degree in 2.5 years, doing a double majors in finance and
Communications. Sure.
Mass communication. So talk to me about that. Like, what made you, when you were doing finance, what made you think that, I want to do this also and be like an overachiever, basically?
No, I don't think overachiever is the right way to...
No, it is.
No. So I think that while I was studying finance, as I said, maths was a game which I was very strong at ever since school. And while I got the gist of the new country as well as education down there in the first 6 months, I thought that I can take up another challenge. And something which I realized, I wouldn't say which I was probably lacking, but I thought that can be a great point would be communications. Okay. And that's why while we talk about mass communications, I don't think that my forte was to actually be a journalist, right? But to actually just be a writer. And how to come at peace with finance and communications in general. And probably, at that point of time, I did not really know what to do. I was 18. So I thought that maybe I can pursue a life of financial writer or something of that sort. And finance really, I wouldn't say was easy, but I think I just liked it. And that's probably one of the reasons why I thought that spending 4 years in college and taking multiple breaks would just be a waste of time. I'd rather just complete the college early so that I have a year and a half's time to really explore what I want to do in life, or what are the different paths that finance has to offer me. Because I think at when you're 20, 21, it's just very vague for you to really decide a path, or not everyone has that, and I was one of them. So I think that that was one of the reasons why I think I wanted to get done with college early, so that I have that leeway where I can decide what next was coming to me, or what next for my life was written for me.
So you were liking it, and that's what drove you to study more, and because you were enjoying it, you did not want to take a break from it.
Absolutely. I think that a break would have just explored few more opportunities for me, or gotten few more thoughts in my mind. And I think I wanted to be stuck to my thought. So
Right.
that's what
Right.
I would like to keep it as.
Good. I get what it means, because sometimes when I'm also working on something, I'm like, oh, before I lose that vibe about it, let me
Correct.
just get done with it. So I
mean,
get it.
Sticking to the vibe for 2.5 years was
It's
something
tough,
which was
it's tough.
difficult. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I stuck to it, and it paid off.
Great.
So-
So you finished that, and you went on to do work in a e-commerce real estate firm, Fly Spaces in Singapore. So I'm very curious about you did finance, it's fine, but you chose Singapore. Why?
So I think I was done with the concept of US as like a developed country, as they like to say. And as far as competition was concerned, I wanted to go and try out a new territory altogether. So as soon as I got done with my college, I had a couple of offers from Goldman Sachs and places. But I thought that I would rather want to go to Asia's financial hub, because something which I was pretty certain about was that I want to move back to India, or if not India, in Asia, right? So that home is closer. You have, I mean, at the end of the day, you want people around you, right? And I thought that Asia would definitely be my to-go hub. And hence I tried out Singapore. Now,
Right.
Singapore, of course, as everyone knows, is currently Asia's financial hub, capital,
Right.
whatever we like to call it as. Also is very centrally located to Hong Kong, which is also another hub, and
Exactly.
all the places, right? Not far away from India as well, and one of the most rather better places to live in. So I went on to Singapore. I had a job in hand already. I used to work for Call Levels, and used to write financial articles for Yahoo Finance Singapore through Call Levels.
Okay.
When I got a random call from my dad one day saying that, it'll be great if you can actually explore something into real estate. I said that it's too late for you to tell me, because I can't be an engineer anymore. I'm sure that you've always wanted me to pursue chartered accountancy, and now asking me to really go become an engineer or really do anything into real estate, I don't think it's possible. And with numbers in mind, sure, but again, management was not something I was very good at, right? This was not about just business administration or something. So then I thought that, might as well actually try to go and explore something which is going to be of the future, or rather which is working into the fast-paced environment. Now, when you talk and compare something like a Singapore and an India, it's two different worlds altogether, not in terms of just places, but an organized as well as an unorganized sector countries altogether. And I think real estate in general is a very unorganized sector.
In what way? Because I don't have I don't have much insights into the building stuff, but we have warehouses, so I know the construction and that part of it.
Correct.
But in what way is it unorganized?
When you look at the quantum that any project brings in, right, one or multiple, just look at the number of people, number of things that go into perspective as far as that is concerned. The people, right? I think that at any point of time, there are at least 300 to 400 people working on a site. Managing them plus managing the clientele or the lead base that you're getting from time to time, focusing on investors, the whole cycle is not as organized as you want it to be, and that is because it's been prevalent since a very long time. And there are so many people at stake, from including the government, the labor, your clientele, as far as you talking to your contractors. It's always going to be that way, right? So when I was in Singapore and I wanted to get an idea about how this works, I thought that might as well go into something which is very organized, so that if anything were to be replicated or if anything I were to get ideas from, it would be helpful for me in my family business. That's when I joined Fly Spaces, and it was an experience of sorts. Started working with the co-founder back in 2017 October, when we were three people in an organization.
What exactly did FlySpace do?
So
for
Fly Spaces
anybody
was
who
an
doesn't know?
was an e-commerce platform, as you said, a marketplace, not a platform, e-commerce platform, but a marketplace where if Shruti were to actually rent out her home, or probably wanted a home on rent or office on rent, or wanted to rent out a place for someone's wedding, etc., so on and so forth, she just needed to go on that platform, do 2 clicks, and she was ready to go to.
Okay.
She can just book it.
Like, so people have their properties listed.
They can list it, and somebody who's looking for anything can just rent it out.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And that's exactly where I found co-working spaces as well.
Okay.
So that was an experience. I think as I was saying, was working with the co-founder directly. We were a team of 3 members, and by the time I left, which was in roughly 12 to 14 months, 13 months, we were a team of 30. Okay. So I have seen a company grow from inception to like its growth stage in about a year's time, right? So that experience, I think, has been absolutely invaluable to me, because I don't think I can compare it to anything that I've learned in college or anywhere.
It's also because of the timing, I think.
Absolutely right.
You're very impressionable in that time when you get the right people, and you're influenced in a good way.
Yeah, I think when you're 21, the only thing which really matters to you, or I think which mattered to me, was that I wanted to learn anything that I can take in. I wanted to take in, and I think that was a huge game-changing factor which helped me grow personally to wherever I am today.
Right.
So
Right.
so absolutely.
When you spoke about the unorganization in the real estate part, this is what one thing comes to my mind now. I think this is also why it could be one of the reasons why you mean on a larger scale it's unorganized. I think it goes back to the laws that Indian government has. Is it correct? Am I correct in that? Because when you say, if you say the contractors or laborers or whatever, I think the reforms are not there for the industry to work properly. This is what I'm thinking. Is that one of the reasons, or no?
So I mean, again, I don't think that there is one particular organization or one particular industry I can blame. I cannot blame the government, because if the government's job is to actually give the legislature, right? But it's people's job to really go on and abide by it. So
Right.
how many times can the government be blamed for the same, or how many times can the developer be blamed for the same? It's actually not the legislature, but I think it's just how each state is. Each state for its real estate development has its own laws. And once you have to really look at it in the same particular way, it just becomes very difficult, right? And that is one of the reasons why I think we don't see a lot of developers from Bombay coming to Ahmedabad, or somebody from Ahmedabad going to a Bombay or a Hyderabad.
Because
or a
laws
Lucknow.
change.
Because absolutely, laws
Right.
change, the
Makes
amounts
sense.
change, everything is different. So it becomes very difficult to cope up with it.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. That makes sense. So now talk to me about you were studying finance, and you were working in this e-commerce marketplace, real estate marketplace in Singapore. What made you come back to India? Like, and what was the thought that, okay, maybe I want to do co-working spaces, and how did you actually start? Like, so if somebody is watching and they want to enter that space, so how did you actually start?
So I think as I went back and told you that, it was always, the goal was never to really stick to a job, or the goal was never to really be a professional. It was always to focus on having my own business. Post 15 months or 14 months of being in Singapore, I realized that I was actually ready to go back and explore the same in my own in my own country, in my own city. So that's when I came back to Ahmedabad, because I was 22 when I came back, and I realized that there will be quite a lot of time which I will need to give to my own family business to really understand the nook and corner of it. While I came back, I realized that we all function in a very different way, right? And from the US to the Singapore and then coming back to India, it was a journey, right? And I think when I came back, I saw as to how time consuming the things were over here. With that in mind, I thought that might as well go with something which is fast paced, which has not been yet introduced to the city and to the country in a very minute way, if anything. So 2017 end, or 22nd January 2018 was the first day when the address actually had its first brick kept for the work
Okay.
to be started, right? And May 2018 is when we kind of went live.
Okay.
So
in
during
just January to May.
yeah, so I
just-
think 4 months was the planning phase as well as the construction phase for the same, which went by it. We started with a small scale of roughly 190 seats, 190 seats, which was spread over roughly 14,000 square feet, and so on and so forth. And I think over a span of 3 years, 3.5 years now, with COVID kicking in for a year, we've been able to grow the company 12 times. So that's
One
been
might think it would be the opposite because of COVID. So I'm very interested in that. Like, how did that become an advantage? Because people stopped going out. So
absolutely. I think there was a time personally when I thought that post COVID, I don't think I want to pursue this business anymore as well. Because I think commercial real estate was
lowest.
is at the worst, right? Because I think the repercussions of COVID have not yet been better as to how one would want it to be. Being a developer and being somebody who is also running a forward integration business of co-working in his own premises as well as outside, I took the decision. Some would call it vague, naive, and some would call it um, extremely
Optimistic?
Probably, yeah, optimistic. But I decided that I wanted to expand during the COVID times because the need for these spaces, once people's contracts dried out or once the need of remote working came in, would only expand. While I was done, June 8th, 2020 is when Ahmedabad opened up, right?
For the first, like after the first wave, you're saying?
This is since, after the first wave for good, right? June
Yeah.
8th, 2020 is when Ahmedabad opened up. At that point of time, I was at 57,000 square feet with roughly around 700, 800 seats. And I was vacated by 50%. Before COVID, I used to boast 100% occupancy. It was 50%. 50% went down to 30% by August, September. And that's when it became extremely difficult. And in August, I think we decided to sign off Baroda and expand to Baroda. While we were burning money left, right, and center. And again, I mean, I was considered to be foolish by plenty. And I said that, I don't think I want to look back over here. And I did not. I went on expanding, and I think from 57,000 square feet in June 2020 to I think October 2021, we've grown 5 times just in that particular phase and been able to expand 6 cities now. So I think that that came out well, and one of the reasons why it worked out for us versus anyone else is because we changed the model. We did not want people to really believe in co-working, but rather believe in managed office space, where anything and everything was taken care of with safety coming in at the helm, and everything else was, they had their own private spaces. They did not really need to go out and interact with a lot of people if they did not want to, right? We also brought in the concept of actually personal wellness, business wellness, personal growth, business growth, right? So if Shruti were to actually have a space at the co-working center or the managed office space center, it was not just about you getting a desk or multiple places to work with. It was also about you being able to just expand your business by having payroll services or just having services such as recruiting, staffing, your invoice management, so on and so forth.
So when you, sorry to cut you there, when you say managed office space, is it that, so a normal co-working space would be where somebody comes, they do their work and they go.
Probably.
Like the firm or the institute would not have any role in that except for, the transaction part.
Absolutely.
But when you say managed office spaces, is that what you mean, that you provide the staff from your end also to help them or to facilitate their processes or
Absolutely.
something?
So this is what we started realizing once everything opened up, right? Is that people are always going to want their own offices. They want the feeling of something which is their own. So what we started by managed office space, what do I mean? I think I should define that. Is that they have their own branding. They have their own company signages. They have people they have staff who is actually on our payroll, but doing the work for them, which is all dedicated for them. So
Right.
it is basically them walking into their own office space, right? Having their own branding and we're managing it for them. And that's how the game changed for us over the span of time. Correct.
But how does that work? Like, how is that feasible? Like, you provide the staff, the branding is obviously, I mean, they do the branding or whatever. But talk to me about the whole process. Like, once somebody comes in, and are there any provisions where somebody were to use just the co-working space, and if they don't want the managed office
Absolutely.
model?
Absolutely.
So, and also I want to know the business model of the institute, like the firm itself. Like,
Okay, so first of all, to answer your question, part A is that can somebody just use the co-working space? Yes. If there are 1 or 2 people, probably 10 people, and they do not want their own office space, managed office space, they're okay to be
in the normal common areas.
not just the common area, even a dedicated area of what we have ready, they can. Absolutely, right? They can have it in the open area. They can just work out of, a personal cabin if they want. They can actually work out of relaxation areas as well, whatever they want to.
Okay.
And at the same time, get all the facilities that they're looking for. For example, napping pods, or they just want to go on and work out of a networking area or a chill zone. They're able to do that, a breakout area, right? And adding to your part B, which is
The
what
model
is
of the business
correct.
model of the firm itself.
So there are quite a lot of things which really people do not think about while they take an office space. And once I'm going to point them out, people would think that these are very small things, but they really matter a lot. Once somebody opts for an office, they don't realize that they are going to need one person who's actually going to be taking care of the cleaning and the smaller errands, right? At the same time, there's going to be quite a lot of bills related to internet, AC, carpet, pest control, fumigation, right? Now, if there were 2 people who wanted their own office, are they going to get a studio, an auditorium, a napping pod, a crash facility, a couple of breakout rooms, a gym as a part of their office space? No, not really. So how do you go on and provide them everything under one roof, where they can work out of not just a desk, right, which has been given to them, but out of multiple places, as well as the key of co-working is not really to work together. No, it's actually to come together to create something which is more beautiful than just working out, right? And that is to create relationships, to just network, to have other companies to look forward to, maybe smaller, maybe bigger. And I think I have so many success stories, right, which have come out of this organization. As a whole, it's just been a journey. Seen a couple of companies a couple of people, I think, which started just as 1 or 2 individuals and now are running a company of roughly 80 people.
Okay.
At a time when they couldn't actually afford a rental of 7,000, they're paying 7 lakh, right? And it's not just, again, as I said, not just about money, but a bigger company coming in and taking the help of smaller companies, which gives the smaller companies to get bigger, right? So this is what really matters. And as far as the business model is concerned, there are multiple revenue models which come into play for me, which I don't think I want to share because
Right.
I don't want any competitors to hear me out.
Fair enough.
But,
okay. What I recently saw this one podcast episode where the founder of Cred, Kunal Shah, was talking about, like, they were discussing about the co-working spaces, like the thing had come up, and they were talking about why is it important, or why after COVID, like, why would things why would people want to work together when even they can work in the safety of their home or in their environment or whatever? And they raised one very good point, which is that people who already have businesses or have established networks, for them it's fine if they can work remotely from anywhere. But I think people who are starting out, like say 20, 21, they probably might have a network, might not have a network. So it becomes like a good space for them to create a network also.
Okay.
So that's why, I mean, they reach to a conclusion where that, okay, yeah, this will go on. Like this is never going to go out of style, that people are never going to not want to work together.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm first of all, I'm a huge fan of
Kunal Shah. Yeah.
I really like how he thinks, right, and his entire journey altogether. But with that being said, I also want to point out that at what point of time in life does a person not go out and seek more connections? I don't think ever. Right, everyone at any point of time, may it be 21 or may it be 51, at any point of time does not want to seek new connections as far as their business growth is concerned, personal growth is concerned, anything, right? And
I think it's more an Indian and a Gujarati thing. Like I'm being very honest, because there are people, like if you see in European countries, they are very happy not being very competitive or not working after a certain age and just traveling or working like once or twice a week. There are people who do that. I think it's because I think we've seen more people like around who are excessively into their work, which is sometimes not that good also. But yeah, I get what do you mean by that? The connection part is absolutely correct. But from that point of view, the necessity
from
point
connections, what I mean to tell you, right, is that it's not just a connection which comes into play for a business growth or a business relationship.
Right.
Talking about the Europeans, what they do, I agree that they're not as competitive. But again, they earn in euros. But jokes apart.
And the governments take care of them after a certain point.
They're rather content. Content is the word, right?
Exactly.
At 50, but the part where we were talking about how we're more competitive or something of that sort, it's not always about a business connection.
True.
Talk about a European taking a trip to Spain, or talk about a European coming to India. You'll always see a herd, right? A herd of 20 people. Put a European or put an American in a bunch of, let's say, in their mid-50s, mid-40s, in a good high-end club. They pay for that thing, and that's what they call networking, right? What we do over here is the same thing, but we just...
perspective is the style, the way of doing things is different.
And I think that we're missing out on a couple of things, right? The quality of living that we talk about, the standard of living that we talk about. When was the last time you went to a park? Because the last time...
We don't have any.
So the last time I remember going to a park was...
I'm dying to, but we don't have.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I went to a park because I don't know, right? And they have multiple parks. And it's not just about a park. It's just about what are the things that really make you content? Why do we think is Bhutan one of the happiest countries in the world? And you know, these are a couple...
It is?
It is the happiest place on earth.
I need to see the list.
So yeah. So these are the things, right? What connects you, what makes you happy, what makes you content. And I don't think that as far as you're wanting more, you can be content. And that's what lies in the blood of Gujaratis, to say the least.
Yes. Basically, overall, like people might have different outlooks and ways of doing it.
Correct.
But I think on a larger picture, what Kunal Shah said and what you also say, that, you know, that on a larger picture, the connection...
Correct.
People will always look forward to that.
Absolutely.
People will always want to work in co-working spaces, even if you have established networks.
Fair. No, I mean, not just co-working spaces, but all I think is that I don't think that there is an end to network. That's it. Through co-working spaces or not.
True.
Absolutely.
True.
And yeah.
Talk to me about, you have clients who are like big companies. These, like when you say that, you also talked about that companies who have started from 2-3 employees, but now are a firm of 80 people.
Correct.
But you also have had clients like, say, PhonePe or Accenture. Accenture is one of the biggest consulting companies in the world.
Correct.
So what, according to you, draws the big companies who already have the say for example, they already can afford to create offices like you mentioned, like with nap pods or like, recreative centers or anything. So what draws those companies to co-working spaces?
So correct. We talked about managed office space before, and we talked about co-working as to how this is there, that is there, so on and so forth. But I think that one of the most crucial aspects and the part which why multinationals or a startup or anyone and everyone wants to work over here is just one thing, and that is service.
Okay.
We are not from the real estate industry. We're absolutely from the service industry. Our job is to make sure that when we are managing 5,000 people, which we are today, we have to keep each and every individual happy. We cannot not have that, right? So when we talk about why an Accenture wants to really come to a managed office space is because sure, Accenture can actually have a napping pod in a crash facility, and they probably might have it in their headquarters as well.
Right.
But how will they replicate it throughout the world? What will the real estate cost actually look like? And when they do it, at the end of the day, they still have to manage it by themselves. Over here, when you have a service provider like us, who has been, now I think established and is having a name in the market, why would they not want to do something with us? At each and every time, what happens is that when multinational companies think about getting to a managed office space, serviced office space, there's a capital expenditure cost which comes into perspective. So to make, let's say, office space of roughly 35 people, there's a capex of roughly 70-75 lakhs which goes into play. How many companies?
For a more...
No, just for a normal office space. Not even a huge space,
the extras.
Right? Correct. So how many companies would want to do that? Now, cut short and come to the address who is providing you all the services. And not just that, but at the same time on Wednesday, you have a happy hour. On Monday mornings, you have a breakfast session. On Friday evenings, you can just go and meet people. You can just have a stand-up comedy show.
You have basically activities planned at the...
Absolutely. With everything focused on one thing, which is productivity. We give services so that people are more productive, right? And which is focused on what? Health, mental health, including wellness, physical activity as well, and just chilling, right? So I think work-life balance post-COVID is something which people have realized more importantly than anything. And I think that is what we have been trying to bring in since a very long time. And post-COVID, I think we saw the boom because people realized that how it is so important, and they're going to continue with the same.
And also because like people saw that if you provide people with all the technologies and if they don't have to go out of the house, one might wonder why would you go out? But we saw, I think in COVID, that you still want to go out.
Correct.
So I think after COVID, when people got a chance, they were even more like, looking forward to it, that, we want to go and do this, meet people and, hang out together in groups.
Correct. So, I think that somebody like me who is very social, I can't live without meeting people or being around people, right? But that may or may not be the same for everyone, but for how long? People had already faced a good 6 to 8 month period where they couldn't meet anybody else but the families. Right. For the people that used to live in apartments, maybe their apartment mates,
neighbors or
correct, right? And now post COVID, I think for the first 6 months there was quite a lot of tension, stress as to what will happen next, right? And once things settled down, once everything was okay, I think people realized the value of people in their lives.
Exactly.
And that is something which was so important. Somebody who is, people who are anti-social also really started to go out and talk to meet people. May it be less, but at least it was something which they realized was very important to do with time.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to that, I agree with everything you just said, because there's this line stuck in my head, because I socialize, but I'm very particular about very close people and I stick to those people and everything. But this line stuck with me that a man is a social animal. Because I sometimes wonder, as I said, that, if technology comes in, what if there comes a day when we don't have to meet a single person and get everything done?
Sure.
How would that be?
Why do we use the technology for? To
for everything.
Fair.
Not socializing part.
Correct.
But say, for example, you mentioned somebody who's anti-social or something.
Sure.
So, if they don't want to deal with people, like if they can order food, they can watch movies at home, like just like that. But I realize at the end of the day, still man is a social animal, and you will, little or more, you will need that interaction.
Correct.
So now I want to talk about something, which I think we all have heard in the news, or I don't know. But I want to talk about WeWork, which is, it's got very hyped up, and it's one of the most hip happening co-working spaces. Also because it comes from US, and US is always like, anything that originates in US is always more hyped up. So talk to me about like, what do you think about like that company had, like when it came out, like when it made an offering in the public, it had an valuation of $47 billion, but in just 6 weeks it filed for bankruptcy. So like in general, like, have you followed that company? Have you followed the founder closely? Because I've tried to a little bit. But what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious to know that.
So one thing was that WeWork was valued at $80 billion before it filed for bankruptcy.
Okay.
And it did not actually file for bankruptcy.
It did not go through with it.
Correct.
Because SoftBank bailed him out.
So SoftBank helped him survive.
Yeah.
However, when WeWork started, as a small joint in New York, and it was actually focused on the prospect of co-working, as and how it kept on getting the money, right? The whole and sole principle on which the company was built was lost. It became extremely difficult for the company to really evaluate as to what business is it in. Is it in the business of providing schools? Is it in the business of actually renting out buildings and giving buildings out on rent or seats out on rent? Or, is it actually just in the business of making a community or an app where people are coming in and exchanging business ideas on their platform? At that point of time, when the founder of the company is just purchasing a plane, right? Or is selling a trademark company name to its own company.
His own self. To his
Correct.
Own self.
No, from taking it from his
and
own.
selling it to the company, back
right?
to the company.
For $20 million, these things are not what really builds a company. The entire aim of the organization, or a founder of the organization, is the greater good of the organization over himself or herself, right? And I think that principle was somewhere lost for WeWork. At any point of time when you're justifying a valuation of $80 billion and filing for an IPO, you cannot just go on numbers, right? Which are going to be talking about when you're seated in 2020 and talking about 2050. That's a scenario. For me, what happens in 5 years down the line is a dream. Because I don't know at what pace is the world going to change. I can't tell you what the world was like in 2016, and I did not imagine the world would be like this in 2021. But here we are. And so 2026, if the founder was supposed to say that this is going to happen, I would still be a little pessimistic, right? And he was talking about 2050.
Right.
So these things are not something which are heard of. And from not being able to justify a valuation of $80 billion is fair. But not being able to get an IPO on a valuation of $2 billion is just pathetic. And this is what really happened to WeWork. There are plenty of things which I can go on and talk about. But I think that one of the major things in life which I stick by, as well as which the company did not stick by, was one thing, which was their principle. The principle of doing business was...
Also.
Absolutely.
They lacked clarity.
Correct. They lacked clarity because they grew too quick. Because the access to money was too easy.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So that is something which really did not work out in their favor. And even today, I mean, they're now valued at roughly around $6 billion, but getting an IPO is next to impossible. Yeah. So I think.
I think they are just trying to cover up and say it's 6 billion. I don't think it's that much. Also, like, they lack clarity and everything, but
But I think with the offerings that they were willing to give, or with the offerings that they really are giving, they've cut down on way too many things, right? They started a kindergarten school, if you were aware. And they just wiped out all these things and are now focused on their core competency, which is co-working spaces as well as office spaces. So now let's see. I think the next 2 years will be a defining factor for them. But now with the competition coming in and coming in fair and square, it will be very difficult for them to really...
Definitely. And also, I think one of the things that I was going to say is that because a lot of money was available very easily, when something you get very easily, you don't know what to do with it. That's why it just put money in the schools.
Absolutely.
And, like...
a lot of things, right? But I think this has been a very challenging factor for other co-working players, and I don't talk about myself, but... anyone around the world, right, is that the access to funds has become very difficult for co-working players.
Because of his reputation.
Absolutely. And because of one player, there's about 12,000 players just in Asia right now, which I would assume would be a good 75,000 in the world. And imagine the access to funds getting difficult for all of them when they want to grow. So this is something that has now played out, but I think eventually with time it should be better.
But I'm very also intrigued about what made SoftBank, I am not able to recall the name of the person. I know it starts with M. But what made him give away so much money just like that? If you would think, like as an investor, because we'll get to it later about disruption and investing that you do. But when you think about that, like, what made him do that? So
their Vision Fund, which is the SoftBank Vision Fund, which invests into the future things, right? Future startups or the world of future. They saw that WeWork is going to be one of the platforms which is going to, be a revolution in the real estate industry, which I think it could have if their growth traction as well as the growth channel was right. When you need 30 people and you take in 300 is wrong. The vision was clear, and I think that honestly speaking, it was as wrong of Newman as well as, the founder of WeWork, as well as of SoftBank. SoftBank was somebody that kept on pushing more money into WeWork and pushed him to grow at a rapid pace, right?
Yes.
And they kept on taking centers left, right, everywhere, right? And at what point of time do you actually realize that there is a cap? At what point of time do you realize that, yes, this is all that I need in this particular city, in this particular country, right? Which never came out. Right. There are quite a lot of different revenue models. There are quite a lot of strategic partnerships which WeWork has, which WeWork got in. And a lot of Fortune 500 companies also preferred WeWork at that point of time.
Right.
But then you talk about an IWG group, which is Regus, right? Which started this concept way before WeWork was ever a player, right? And the reason why SoftBank funded WeWork was how it was different, about how it had an idea. It was about how they wanted to create a community, how they wanted to have so many things under one roof. And by having all of that, as I said, you can't forget your core, which they forgot. It went on and on about really having more and more and more that it forgot what the base was. And that's where it went wrong. And then we talk about an IWG, which is the Regus Business Center, right? They're always stuck to their particular business. They don't want to go on and create a community. They don't want to go on and, be very different. They've been in this business since 2005, 2006. It's 2021. And I think that there is a reason why they are where they are.
I've heard the argument. You made interesting points, and I agree. But I've also heard an argument that they were basically, some people have made this argument that they were basically like landlord in a different style. Because because it's also very optimistic, like some people made this argument that it's also very optimistic that you are signing long-term leases with the property owners or the landowners. But the return where you are getting from is, say, $400, $600 from people who will hire the co-working space.
Correct.
So you are getting into a very long-term spending as opposed to not very long-term earning potential or something. How do you see that?
Fantastic. And I love this question. And I've answered this before as well, and I'm going to answer it again, saying that being a developer, I know that the safety of money is more important than the return. if you were to choose an Accenture or a WeWork, people are going to stick by to Accenture. The reason being that Accenture will pay its rent, right? WeWork, over the span of its inception, in about the last 10 to 12 years, they have been able to vacate more than 150 centers, which were actually on long leases as well.
Exactly.
Right? And when you talk about vacating 150 centers, that's absolutely bonkers, because how do you justify that to the investors when they've already vacated the centers? So being a developer, I think that the safety of money, where the money is coming in for the property owners or for whoever is that owner of that particular property, the safety of the money is more important than the percentage return going up by 0.5 percentage.
True.
Correct?
True.
So that is one of the things which Regus failed, which WeWork failed at as well. So I think I don't think WeWork was. The investors were very focused at a point of time, sure, because that was a new interesting concept which came in the market, but at a later stage, absolutely not.
But do you think the biggest reason, which I also think, is that this argument that this strategy was flawed, like signing long-term leases for something that you are not sure if you will get something in return or not?
Sure.
I mean, I think that's, even if they had a good clarity,
Sure.
that's a really flawed thing to get into.
Sure. So usually when you actually take up something on rent, right, anywhere around the world, 9 years is the agreement tenure which comes into play.
Yeah.
They used to go for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now that's exactly double. I mean, as I said, 5 years is a dream, right? You don't even know the inflation rate which is going to play out in each and every different country. Inflation rate in India is roughly 6 to 7%, whereas inflation rate in the US is 1%. Keeping all these things in mind, I mean, I come from the finance background, right? So it is extremely important to know and understand as to how is the inflation going to play a role in the overall cost of the company's balance sheet. I cannot think about the company's balance sheet just overall as a whole, what comes in and what goes on. I have to look at it from country perspective, going down the city perspective, so on and so forth, which I don't think
failed.
existed. Yeah, sure.
True. I mean, and I also was, when I was, I normally also follow this guy, Chamath, he the founder of Social Capital. He worked in Facebook as a developer. And he also said the same thing. Like, he just said this one sentence, and I really follow him closely because I really agree with a lot of things that he has to say. Like with WeWork, it's just that it's waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to leases, and I think it's true. I think that model is flawed, even if you have clarity. In a way, like, to pull that off is
I'm not, I mean, sure. So I think one of the business models which I follow, which I think is the right business model to follow, is when you actually see money in the bank. Point A. And point B is that there should be self-sustaining business model at some point of time, right? At what point of time do you put that stop?
right.
Is for you and the investors to decide.
Right.
I would say that for me, for my business model, if I'm not making money at the end of 3 years, I don't think it's a sustainable business model. If
Right.
I'm not cash flow positive at the end of 3 years, it's not a sustainable business model. For people, it could be 30. And that's
Right.
exactly what WeWork sold. And people took, right? So hence 80 billion came to 2. And I think that is the way to sum it up for me, because when you talk about business models, there can be plenty, right? Lekin being a Gujarati, being a Banya, all I know is that at the end of the day, if you're actually not taking money home, then why are you running the company?
True.
That's it.
True.
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree with that. So yeah, basically to conclude, like everybody has to define their own sustainability, keeping the optimistic and realistic in balance.
Absolutely.
Right? And B is that, of course, you have to make money and not just like lose money or like.
Absolutely. I think if a dress wants to be a unicorn, right? And if I'm going to raise on a valuation of 7,500 crore and I'm going to ask Shruti to put in 100 rupees just for me to justify that I'm a unicorn, it is extremely easy.
Exactly.
But now actually showing in money worth 7,500 crore, where you actually go out, get an IPO and say that yes, I'm a unicorn, is something else.
Yeah.
And that
You
is what
see,
gets you
like,
good
you're
sleep
not,
at night. That's
that's-
what gets investors a good sleep at night, right?
Yeah, that's a very, that's exactly the point that I was reading in this book, which also said that rather than like predicting that this is how it's going to turn out, either you bookend it,
Correct.
like plus minus how much ever it's going to go on a scale.
Correct.
That's a better way of doing it.
Absolutely.
Or then you legit just show it, like at present if you're there. Either of the two. Rather than just blindly predicting that, oh, this is going to happen.
I don't think prediction for me works because I believe in numbers which come in.
Right, true.
And that's exactly what I look at while I invest in companies.
That's a wise way of that's a wise way of doing things. From investing in companies, I want to talk about, you're also the co-founder of Disruption. So I'm very curious about that also. Talk to me about how that happened. Like it's very recent. Like it started in 2021.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's something which was absolutely something that came out as a passion, right? While I was starting up the address, there were quite a lot of things which were told to me that, you know, you're taking a foolish decision by bringing something up in a tier 2 city like Ahmedabad. I don't think that there will be acceptance, so on and so forth. And when I think about this, right, is that there are so many founders from different fields. Some want to do X, some want to do Y, right? And some might be dreaming of actually going to the moon. And when we think about that, when you're a tier 2 or a tier 3 city founder, right, the challenge that you come in with is that particular horizon in general. The access to funds is absolutely next to impossible in this particular country if you're not an IIM or an IIT graduate.
True.
And let me put this straightforward, right? While I started the address, I used to have a lot of flake coming in, right? With that being said, if you can be very well connected, you might be able to raise one round. If you're extremely well connected, you might raise a subsequent round. But at what point of time will that stop when people realize that, no, this is not true? Disruption, a consulting platform, came in for majorly the founders, the startups. When I realized that there were so many people, so many founders, so many companies, so many organizations from Ahmedabad and various tier 2 cities such as Baroda, Surat, mainly Gujarat because my focus is here.
Of course.
That they are not able to raise when they have absolutely brilliant ideas just because they do not have that finesse which an IIM or an IIT gets in for them, right?
They're raw.
They're raw. They're absolutely raw.
Yeah.
But that does not define a human. That does not define as to how they are supposed to be running a business. Just because they're raw does not mean that they cannot run a business, right? And if you were to actually look at any particular example, everyone was raw at a point of time, right?
Exactly.
And that is what we wanted to do. That is what we wanted to help all the founders with. And hence Disruption provides them with 0 to 1 any and every service that a founder is looking for. If they're looking for an access to a co-founder, right? If they're looking for services such as fundraising, if they're looking for a pitch deck, if they're looking for financials, if they're looking for actual tie-ups with other companies where they can get help, their connections, right? If they really just need funding for that particular stage to get going and they have a brilliant vision, making sure that it is out there in the market, making sure it is out there in the public, which is the right market to go to. What are their marketing strategies? What are their go-to market strategies? What is their TAM? So on and so forth, everything, right? And every founder has that particular idea in their mind. It's absolutely about putting it on paper, helping them grow, and pitching it to the investors in the right frame of mind. That's it. And hence, we've created a good $2 million fund for us to put money into startups as well. All the money that we put into startups, we'll be hand-holding them to raise a subsequent round as well. We'll be helping them till Series A because I feel that till then they're absolutely mature. And, it's not only focused on a particular field, but we're taking in all startups, mentoring them through and through wherever we can.
So it's not just funding them, it's overall
it's absolutely
nurturing them in every way they need nourishment.
So some founders which might need a founder, right? At various points in time, I feel that it was so much better if I had a co-founder with me. It could make my life so much easier, right? And then even today, I look forward to a co-founder which can take the burden away of just management, and I can take care of the finance, the sales, so on and so forth, right? So it's always that way, making sure that the mistakes that the three founders have made in our working life, as in our journeys, and making sure that they're not repeated, and making sure that we have the best in-house mentors as well as the best of everything that has to be offered to these startups for their future journey is what Disruption gives.
So I want to know, how do you, like, it's also about time and money, right? So you can't help everyone, even though you want to.
Absolutely.
But you, at the end of the day, you do have to pick which people you.
This is
You
what
know,
I talk to most of the college students, right? So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one question, and you can be either absolutely right or either absolutely wrong.
Okay.
Which business do you think has the biggest margin?
Margin?
Yes,
I think the technology.
it's Pan Ki Dukan. But why do people not
I
put in
don't
money?
think-
Why do people not put in money into that?
I don't think Pan Ki Dukan.
It is.
I
It is.
How?
We can go on and on about that because it's not scalable. Any business that any investor wants to put in money to has to be scalable. Every investor only looks at one thing, which is scalability. How can your business go from 100 to 100 crores is all that matters to investors, right? And from bath salts se leke, as I said, if anybody wants to go on Moon, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, wherever, right? It is only about how quickly can they do it and how quickly can an investor get an exit. This is, in India currently, there has been never so much money which has come into private equity till date, which is at this particular moment post-lockdown in 2021. This is the world of D2C and tech startups, correct? Now identifying them and looking at their scalability plans is exactly what is going to matter, with an outlook overview on the team. If you have the right team, if you have people with right experiences, and if you have the vision, if you have to scale, that's all that is currently required for people to really, go on and think about that company. Because talk about a Zomato or talk about a Byju's, which is roughly now a 10-year-old company acquiring Akash, which is a 50-year-old company. At all points of time, my dad always used to tell me, go for something which is smooth sailing, which has been for the market in longer. And here I give him the example of Byju's acquiring Akash, and he says, wow, this is a different world, and this is going to be a different world all lifelong from now, what we see. And it's only going to keep on increasing at a rapid pace. So, yeah.
So basically, what I can conclude from that, what I can get like a end result is, how you would pick a company is how fast it's scalable.
Sure.
Right?
The team.
In the disruption, like
Absolutely.
the people that you would consult,
Correct.
act as a consultant for,
Sure.
would be how fast you can scale that company.
Correct.
That's the first you would
Absolutely.
get.
The
and
team.
Yeah, and how fast you can make money and get out of.
Not really that, but the ability of a founder. My co-founder says it very well. The ability of a founder is to raise a subsequent round.
Right.
When will that money? When will that company be able to give me an exit?
Right.
Or that.
Yeah.
So
good.
that
yeah,
is
of
that.
course, like, because that's the
Absolutely.
end goal, and
Absolutely.
the sooner, if you're very clear about things in mind, the sooner you
Absolutely.
get it, the better.
Absolutely.
Great. So I have one very interesting question, because it always keeps coming on in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, because like my dad has been working like for like all his life and everything, and sometimes when I look at him, like I see I see that some people, when they don't understand something, they don't want to get into it.
Fair.
Does disruption have any, or you per se as a person,
Mm-hmm.
like you, say for example, what is the something that you don't understand, but you might not need to understand, like say somebody comes to you
Mm-hmm.
for funding or consultancy or to expand or something.
Correct.
But you're like, oh, how stupid, like I don't get it, like I don't understand this is never going to work.
Correct.
Because we all have those blind spots towards some things, right?
Correct.
So I what are the things that you either you have thought of that this is my blind spot, or if you're not able to recognize the blind spot, but you're like, I'm not able to understand it, but maybe this will
Sure.
work.
So I'm going to give a real life example, because only that would matter at this
Right.
point. There was a company which came to me which talked about making houses on the moon.
Okay.
There we go, right? I saw that reaction. And what do you say to that? Because I don't
I would
understand.
buy, but
Absolutely. I would buy. But would I invest in a company which is going to be building houses over there? Because that's taking a blind spot. That is absolutely going into the dark, right? But I mean, this is what we think is a joke over here in India.
Yeah.
There are about 35 companies in the Silicon Valley
Who are
doing
working at it,
doing
like-
and processing the same.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
So So I mean, these are the things, and that is one of the reasons why we have 3 co-founders and a brilliant team to really research on it and make sure that whatever we're getting into, we have. It's again, as I said, it's about mentoring them as well. So what I look at personally and what we look at as an organization is that it should also be that if we understand or not, is it going to be that can we help them? Right? Can we sell that particular story? Can we sell that particular idea? Because if we can, that's a win, and that is going to take them to the next level.
Irrespective of if you understand it or not.
Absolutely.
Say, for example, this company that came to you for building houses on moon. Now, you might not understand
Correct.
it, but would you still go ahead with like reaching out to investors for that? Did you?
I mean, again, first of all, there's quite a lot of research which needs to go before we even reach out to investors.
Right.
For that particular company, we did not go ahead
Okay.
because it did not really speak to us or made sense to us. But there are plenty of them, right? And which I did not think were the right ones, but overall
Have
it
made
came
money.
out to be absolutely.
Yeah.
I had made money and also which spoke to somebody else and was perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I think the having co-founders helps, right?
Absolutely.
Because the more you have people who might not who are like-minded, but who might not exactly think like you. So that's why you get the disadvantage of having different points of views of people, and something that might not speak to you might speak with your co-founder, and he can educate you on that, and then you guys can go ahead.
Absolutely. A different set of ideas is exactly what one requires to be creative at all points of time.
Right.
A co-founder and the right team brings in that.
Yeah.
And then we kind of just have to look at what is right, what is wrong, and then we kind of go ahead with the same.
Great. I think so. So many people should keep in mind that having a co-founder has many advantages. Than just having somebody who
Absolutely.
you're going to have fun with, but it's going to like have a lot of advantages. And one, if they can, they should have a co-founder.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now we'll move. I have one more question left. What are the lessons that you've learned along the way in your journey of, say from doing finance in the US, studying finance in the US to now to founding a co-working space, a company, and even a
A
consulting company
firm,
and
sure.
everything.
So I think that a couple of things. That life can be very unpredictable, and you really don't know what the next 3 years are really going to be like, right? One thing is that life keeps on changing at a very rapid pace, and it is very difficult sometimes to cope up with it. You have to really run fast because it does not really work at your own. The life doesn't work at your pace, right? With that being said, there are quite a lot of challenges which one faces when they're starting up, and one needs to realize that a founder himself or herself is never going to be sufficient to run a business successfully. It is never about an individual or 2 co-founders. It is always about the team as a whole. I think one of the aspects which I really want to focus on and give an advice to whoever is listening to this is that you really need a team to do anything. You cannot do anything by yourself. Right?
True.
You cannot hire just for the sake of it, just to make sure that this will be a timely process and you'll get better people at a later stage. No. Your principles, your team has to be clear from day 0 for you to achieve whatever you want at a longer stage. If you have a vision to make a company and organization over a larger span of time, you need a brilliant team. As a founder, you need to have the tenacity to get across whatever comes your way. COVID can be helpful for few and it can be a disaster for few. Do you have an organization which is going to sustain the best times or the worst? Then you're on the right track. Is it going to be making money in the best or the worst? Then you're on the right track. And what major people don't really talk about is that sometimes it all looks great or it looks absolutely pathetic for a lot of founders when things are happening, right? But there are people, and I can talk about myself. Sometimes I don't get sleep. Sometimes it's a 4-hour sleep, and I think 5.5 hours is the max sleep I've probably gotten over the last 2 years. It's not easy, right? Whatever looks good on the outside, there's everyone fighting a different battle altogether. physical health, mental health, and most importantly, I think the emotions which come out different points
At
of
different
time.
circumstances
Correct,
that come
right? It really frames a person overall over the larger span of time. So if you really think that you have it in you to be a founder, then make sure that you have the tenacity to
Be
come across,
resilient, basically.
absolutely, resilience to come across anything which comes into your way. And I
said,
think
well said.
that's
I
something
think that word in itself, I think, encompasses everything. Resilience.
I think that is something that I have learned over the
That's
journey.
what you've learned along the
Yeah.
way, that you need to have tenacity and resilience.
And a brilliant team.
Great. So now we'll move to a more fun segment, which is called Curious Quick 5.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you like quick 5 questions that, and
Okay.
you can be quick or
Sure.
whatever. So what's the one thing you're curious about apart from like, say, investing, consulting, finance? What's the one thing?
Really, I think I'm very, very curious about just food. Extremely curious about food. I think I want to try any and everything, all cuisines all around the world, and I want
Right.
to try all the pizzas that there probably are, all kinds of bases. I don't know. I just think about pizzas all night.
Right. Food, it's a good thing to be curious
Food,
about.
yeah,
Yeah.
food.
What's the one person you're curious about?
Wow. No, I'm not sure.
Nobody?
No, I'm not really very curious about people.
Okay.
I think I'll probably be curious about myself. I don't know if that's a very
No, it can be.
yeah, I think from what I was at 16, 21, 25, I've just been knowing
Evolving
things
and
absolutely
everything.
right. And
Yeah.
I think about how I am after 3-5 years, and I don't know.
It's bonkers. Yeah, like when
I'm
you
just
think-
curious about seeing how life unfolds.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. What's the one place you're curious to travel to?
Probably Norway.
You've not been there.
No,
Yeah,
I've
right.
not
So
been
makes
to
sense.
Norway, yeah.
Great.
Sure.
Any Scandinavian countries wins. Like
Absolutely.
good.
I want to see the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's the one technology that you're curious about?
I think we're already. I shouldn't abuse that. We're done with technology already. There's
I think
enough
we
I've
need-
seen. I don't think I want to see robots with guns anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's all we've. I think we've
that's
seen
a
enough.
nightmare.
Correct.
Yeah,
We've seen enough.
Yeah, we have. I agree. I couldn't agree more
Correct.
with that. What's the one book author that you're curious about, or one book or author that you would recommend everyone to read that impacted you in a good way?
I don't
your
know
journey?
if Kunal Shah has written a book, but I think if he were to write a book, I would probably read that.
I think he has.
Then I would
one.
read
I
that.
think.
But I
Yeah,
don't.
Yeah.
I haven't read it.
Yeah. I haven't too.
But I just.
I think I'm not sure.
I just keep on looking at his Twitter from time to time, and I just read his tweets, and they kind of talk to me.
Yeah.
I think his experiences are something which I correlate to on a next level.
Yeah, he has some really
Yeah,
good
absolutely.
insights.
So
Like-
I think and correlation is what matters. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that.
Yeah, we've reached the end of the podcast.
Lovely.
And I would like to know if there's anything that you want to share about everything we spoke about, if I forgot asking you about something, or just general thoughts about the whole conversation.
No,
or
I think
anything.
it was great. It was beautiful, and I think I kind of went through a journey of.
Yeah.
I just reminisced quite a lot of things, and
Yeah.
it was fun
Yeah.
because it's been a journey, and when you remember these things, they kind of come and speak to you, and it just comes out of you, right? So
Yeah.
it was absolutely fun, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for
Great.
taking the time and coming. So thank you for that.
Sure.
And yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
lovely having you.
Thank you very much.